Hello, everyone, and welcome to 60 Nightmares. I'm your storyteller tonight, here to guide you into the shadows. I know many of you drift off to sleep while listening, so before we begin, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Tell me, where are you watching from, and what time is it for you right now? Now settle in. Let the world outside fade away, because the nightmares are waiting, and it all begins right here. Imagine waking up in the middle of the night, thinking you're safe, only to realize you might not be. Tonight, on 60 Nightmares, you'll hear stories of strangers in attics, hidden stalkers, and terrifying encounters in the quietest corners of the world. Some are true, some are unexplainable, but all will leave you questioning what lurks in the shadows of everyday life. Stay alert, because you never know when your nightmare might start. Story 1. It started with small things going missing. A protein bar here, a sock there. At first, I told myself I was forgetful. I live alone, in a quiet neighborhood, and sometimes my mind just wandered. But then things got stranger. My TV would be on a different input than I'd left it. A cupboard door slightly ajar. Little things, easy to dismiss, except I knew I hadn't touched them. Sometimes at night, I'd hear faint bumps from the ceiling. I'd tell myself it was raccoons or the house settling. The creaks and groans of an old building are normal, aren't they? I tried to convince myself it was nothing, but deep down, I felt it. Someone was up there. One night, I came home late from work, exhausted, ready to collapse into bed. That's when I saw it. A shadow moving past the attic vent in the hallway. My heart froze. My first thought was exhaustion, imagination, maybe too much coffee. But it didn't feel imagined. It felt real. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I bought a cheap motion sensor camera off Amazon and pointed it at the attic access panel. Just a precaution, right? 2 nights later, at exactly 2:17 a.m., my phone buzzed. Motion detected. My stomach dropped. I opened the clip, and there it was, a person, quietly climbing down from the attic ladder, glancing around the kitchen. My home. I was in it. I froze. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to hide, to scream. Instead, I locked myself in my room and called the cops. The dispatcher kept me calm, but inside I was panicking. I gripped a bat, listening as my own house seemed to turn against me, every creak amplified into a potential threat. When the police arrived, the intruder was gone. But the attic told the story. A sleeping bag, snacks, a small camping stove, empty water bottles. Someone had been living there. Weeks, maybe months. The culprit? My neighbor's grown son. He'd been kicked out months ago for drug issues, broke in while I was on vacation, and never left. He would sneak down at night to eat, watch TV, and retreat before I ever noticed. He was arrested, and I moved out 3 weeks later. but the memory lingers. Sometimes in a silent house, I can't sleep. Every bump, every creak, my mind goes back to that shadow, descending from the attic, silently stepping into my life without permission. But that wasn't the only time the quiet turned dangerous. The woods, the streets, even hotels. Sometimes strangers invade the safest places, and what happened next would shock everyone. Story 2. It was mid-March, and my friends and I, all in our early 20s, wanted a weekend away from the city. We loved hiking, backpacking, camping, anything that let us disappear into nature. Living in the Pacific Northwest made it easy to find remote spots, but this time, we wanted somewhere truly off the beaten path. Earlier that week, we drove out of town, searching for a campsite. We found a rural road, mostly gravel and grass, and after a short drive, we came to a small roundabout with a flat clearing. The site looked used, but the overgrown grass suggested it had been abandoned for some time. We explored further and discovered a trail leading deeper into the woods. Perfect. No cell reception. No one around. Just us and the wilderness. Thursday night, we loaded up our gear, food, water, camping essentials, and drove back to the spot. As we rounded the curve, our headlights reflected off something in the darkness. A car parked along the road, with a dog barking in the distance. A tent was set up nearby. My friends and I exchanged uneasy glances. This wasn't the empty wilderness we'd scouted. We decided to retreat, hoping the campers would leave the next night. Friday night, we returned. The car and tent were still there, barking dog included. Hesitation flickered, but curiosity pushed us forward. We parked about 50 feet away and hiked up the trail, flashlights cutting through the darkness. Every shadow seemed alive, every rustle in the leaves a warning. Yet nothing happened. We set up camp, laughed nervously, and tried to enjoy the night. The following day, Saturday, we explored further. The woods were serene, deceptively calm. No one approached. No sounds beyond the wind and birds. That night, we slept uneasily, half listening for the barking dog or the crunch of footsteps on the trail. Sunday morning changed everything. We packed up and hiked back to the car. The atmosphere was wrong, silent. The life of the woods seemed drained. The car and tent were still there, but the dog no longer barked. The campsite had been left strangely intact. Tools, motor oil, paper plates, and food were scattered around, like someone had been working on their vehicle in the middle of the forest and disappeared without a trace. Curiosity overtook caution. We cautiously approached, trying to piece together what had happened. The fogged-up, tinted windows revealed a silhouette, a large dog, trapped inside, panting but motionless. Horror washed over us. The dog had likely been stuck since Thursday night, deprived of food and water. We debated breaking in, but feared harming the dog or ourselves. With no cell service, our only option was to leave and contact animal control once we reached a signal. We did so, calling immediately upon returning to town. The officer promised to handle it, and follow up, but hours passed with no word. By evening, I worried constantly. The next day, news arrived. On the same road, a dog trapped in a vehicle had led authorities to a shocking discovery. The body of a woman, deceased. Inside the car, the dog, alive but aggressive, was rescued. The woman's death was later attributed to an overdose, but the coincidence was chilling. We had unknowingly been walking near a crime scene. The incident left a permanent mark. We haven't returned to that part of the woods, and the image of that silent campsite, the dog, the abandoned tools, the vanishing human presence, still haunts me. Story 3. It was a quiet Wednesday night, and I was home alone. The kind of night where nothing feels out of the ordinary. Until it does. Around midnight, I was brushing my teeth when I heard it. 3 slow knocks on the front door. Not loud, not urgent, just deliberate. I froze, toothbrush in hand, listening. Nobody ever came to my door this late. I crept to the peephole, but the porch light barely illuminated the steps. No movement, no figure, just empty air. I told myself it was probably kids playing a prank, or maybe I imagined it. I went back to the bathroom. Not even 5 minutes later, another knock. This time, louder. My heart kicked into overdrive. I moved quickly, making sure the deadbolt was locked. Through the peephole again. Nothing. Silence pressed against the walls of the house. I tried to distract myself, turned on the TV, turned up the volume. Then it happened again. Bang, bang. Harder, more violent, shaking the frame of the door. My chest tightened, fear crawling under my skin. Someone was definitely out there, but they weren't trying to talk, weren't calling out, just pounding. Gripping my phone, I dialed 911, whispering to the dispatcher what was happening. As I explained, the knocking stopped. The silence was worse than the sound. The dispatcher told me to stay on the line and keep talking. Minutes crawled by like hours. Finally, red and blue lights washed over the living room walls. 2 officers approached cautiously, shining flashlights over the porch. They motioned for me to stay inside while they searched. After a tense 15 minutes, they returned with nothing. No footprints on the lawn, no car nearby, no signs of forced entry. It was as if whoever it was had melted into the night. But then the officer asked me something that still makes my skin crawl. He said, "Did you check your back door?" My stomach dropped. I hadn't. We walked together, and sure enough, the sliding glass door to the backyard was unlocked, just barely cracked open. I know I hadn't left it that way. The cops searched again, this time circling the property, but whoever had been there was gone. Before they left, one officer looked at me and said, "If you hadn't called when you did, they might have already been inside." That night, I slept with every light in the house on. To this day, I never ignore a knock at the door. Because sometimes, it's not someone trying to visit. Sometimes, it's someone waiting to get in. Story 4. It was late evening when I pulled into my driveway after a long shift. The street was unusually quiet. No neighbors outside, no cars passing. Just the steady hum of my engine as I turned the key and sat for a moment, letting the silence settle. That's when I noticed him. At the far end of the street, a man was standing under a flickering streetlight. Too far for me to see his face, but close enough to know he was staring in my direction. My first instinct was to brush it off. Maybe he was waiting for someone. Maybe he lived nearby. But as I stepped out of my car and walked toward the front door, I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, heavy, deliberate, following me up the driveway. I turned quickly, pretending to grab something from the back seat, and there he was, closer now. He wasn't pretending to walk past, wasn't heading anywhere else. His eyes were locked on me. My stomach dropped. I forced myself to stay calm, fumbling with my keys like nothing was wrong, though every nerve screamed at me to run. The man stopped at the edge of my driveway, not saying a word, just standing there, breathing, watching. I finally managed to unlock the door and slipped inside, slamming it shut, throwing the deadbolt into place. My heart was hammering so hard I could barely breathe. I peeked through the blinds, praying he had left. But no, he was still there, closer now, standing right at the edge of the porch, his face shadowed, but unmistakably aimed at my window. I dialed 911 with shaking hands, whispering to the operator, while never taking my eyes off the figure. As I explained what was happening, the man moved slowly along the side of the house, out of sight. My blood ran cold. Was he trying to find another way in? Minutes later, headlights appeared. Police! They pulled into the driveway, flashlights cutting through the darkness. That's when the man bolted, sprinting down the street into the woods beyond the cul-de-sac. The officers chased, but never caught him. They told me later they'd had similar calls from other neighbors in recent weeks. Someone lurking in driveways, watching, waiting. They never identified him. For weeks afterward, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house made me jump. Every shadow outside looked like him, standing there in the dark, watching. And sometimes, when I pull into my driveway late at night, I still glance at that same streetlight, half expecting to see him waiting again. Story 5. I had been traveling for work, exhausted after hours on the road, when I finally pulled into a small-town hotel just off the interstate. It wasn't anything fancy, just one of those places where the neon sign buzzes, half the letters burnt out, and the parking lot looks too quiet for comfort. Still, I was too tired to care. I just needed a bed and a few hours of sleep. The clerk at the front desk barely looked at me as I checked in. He slid the key card across the counter and said, "Room 409, 4th floor." His tone was flat, but something about the way he avoided my eyes made me uneasy. I brushed it off, took the elevator up, and walked down the dimly lit hallway. The carpet was stained, the wallpaper peeling, the kind of place where you don't want to touch the walls. When I unlocked room 409 and stepped inside, the air hit me. Stale, heavy, almost metallic, like rust or something worse. I set down my bag and noticed right away that the curtains were drawn tightly shut, but the edges fluttered slightly, as if a draft was pushing through. Strange. I turned on the light, but it flickered before finally holding steady. The room looked normal enough. A bed, a desk, a chair, the usual hotel setup. But the bedspread was wrinkled, not freshly made, like someone had been lying on it just moments before. I called the front desk to ask if the room had actually been cleaned, but the phone line only gave static. No dial tone, no connection. I hung up, unsettled but too drained to argue. As I unpacked, I heard it. A soft tapping sound. Not from the hallway, from inside the room. I froze, listening. Tap, tap. It was coming from the closet. Slowly, I crossed the room and opened the closet door. Nothing. Just a few bent wire hangers swaying slightly, as if they had been disturbed. I told myself it was my imagination, shut the door, and turned the TV on for background noise. But as I sat on the bed, the air grew colder. Not just cooler, unnaturally cold, to the point where I could see my own breath. Then the TV flickered, static hissing across the screen. And in that static, for a split second, I saw a face. Pale, hollow-eyed, gone in an instant. I shot up, heart racing, grabbed my bag, and reached for the door. But the door wouldn't open. The lock jammed, the handle refusing to turn. That's when I heard it again, tapping, but this time from the bathroom, against every instinct screaming at me to leave. I pushed the bathroom door open. The mirror was fogged, as if someone had just taken a hot shower, but the room was icy cold. And in the condensation on the glass, words appeared slowly, as if traced by an invisible finger. You shouldn't be here. My chest tightened, panic flooding every vein. I yanked on the door again, desperate, until finally it gave way. I bolted down the hall, never looking back, and demanded a different room from the front desk. The clerk didn't even look surprised. He just sighed, slid me another key, and said, "Third floor this time." When I asked what was wrong with 409, he only muttered, "Some rooms just don't stay empty." I didn't sleep much that night, and to this day, whenever I see a hotel with a fourth floor, I never take the room they give me, especially if it's number 409. Story 6. When I was a kid, my grandparents owned an old farmhouse just outside of town. It was the kind of place where every floorboard creaked, every door groaned on its hinges, and the wind seemed to whisper through the cracks at night. I loved visiting, but there was one part of the house no one ever talked about: the basement. The door to it was always locked. My grandfather kept the key on a chain he never removed from his belt. Whenever I asked what was down there, he'd just shake his head and say, "Nothing you need to see." That answer only made me more curious. One summer evening, after everyone had gone to bed, I crept downstairs, determined to finally see what they were hiding. To my surprise, the basement door wasn't locked. The key was still in the lock, as if someone had forgotten to turn it. My heart pounded as I slowly twisted the handle and pulled the door open. The smell hit me first. Damp, earthy, and thick, like the air hadn't moved in decades. A narrow staircase descended into total darkness. I grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen and started down, each step groaning under my weight. At the bottom, the beam of my light revealed stone walls lined with shelves, cluttered with dusty jars and broken tools. But the deeper I looked, the stranger it got. On the far wall, carved directly into the stone, were symbols, circles, crosses, and shapes I couldn't recognize. Some of them looked almost fresh, like they'd been scratched in recently. Then, I noticed the door. Not a normal door, but a heavy wooden one, smaller than the others in the house, with iron hinges and no handle on my side. It looked ancient, like it had been part of the house long before my grandparents lived there. I stepped closer, shining the light on it, when suddenly I heard movement. A shuffle, a dragging sound. From the other side of the door, I froze, breath caught in my throat, straining to listen. The sound came again, louder this time, like something pressing against the wood, trying to push through. Terrified, I scrambled back up the stairs, nearly dropping the flashlight. I slammed the basement door shut and locked it, heart racing so hard I thought it might burst. The next morning, I told my grandfather what I'd seen. His face went pale, and for the first time, he looked afraid. He didn't yell, didn't scold me. He just said, "That door was never meant to be opened. Don't ever go down there again." I never did. Years later, after my grandparents passed and the farmhouse was sold, the new owners tore it down to build something modern. But I always wonder, what was behind that old wooden door in the basement? And did tearing the house down really get rid of it? Or did they just let it out? Story 7. It was close to midnight when I was driving down a deserted stretch of highway, miles away from the nearest town. The road was empty, no headlights in either direction, just the endless ribbon of asphalt lit by my high beams. I was fighting to stay awake when I saw her. A young woman stood on the shoulder of the road, her pale dress glowing faintly in the light. She lifted her hand slowly, thumb extended for a ride. Something in me hesitated. Every instinct said to keep driving, but guilt tugged at me. She looked so alone, so helpless. I pulled over, rolling down the passenger side window. She leaned in, her face half hidden by long dark hair, and in a soft voice asked, "Can you take me home?" I nodded, unlocking the door. She slipped into the seat without a sound, her skin ice cold, as though she had been standing in the snow, even though it was summer. I asked where she lived, and she gave me an address a few towns over. As we drove, I tried to make small talk, but she barely responded. Her eyes stayed fixed on the road ahead, unblinking, distant. At one point, I glanced at her reflection in the rearview mirror. There was nothing there. The seat beside me was full, but the mirror showed it empty. A chill ran down my spine. I gripped the wheel tighter, glancing between her and the mirror, unsure of what I was seeing. Finally, we reached the address she had given me, a small, weathered house at the edge of a graveyard. I pulled into the driveway, turned to tell her we'd arrived, and the seat was empty. The door hadn't opened, no sound of footsteps, no trace she had ever been there. Heart pounding, I knocked on the door of the house. An elderly woman answered, eyes tired but kind. I stammered out what had happened. describing the girl in the pale dress. Her face crumpled as tears welled in her eyes. "That's my daughter," she whispered. "She died in a car accident on this road 10 years ago." Before I could respond, she gently closed the door, leaving me standing in the night air, trembling, the sound of the highway echoing faintly in the distance. And now, every time I drive alone at night, I can't help but glance at the side of the road, half expecting to see her standing there again, waiting for someone to take her home. Story 8. Everyone in my town grew up hearing about the old asylum on the outskirts. The building had been empty for decades, its windows shattered, roof sagging, and walls covered in vines. But no matter how ruined it looked from the outside, people whispered that something inside was still alive. When I turned 18, a group of friends dared me to spend the night there. At first, I laughed it off, but curiosity has a way of digging under your skin. One cold autumn evening, with only a flashlight and my phone, I made my way to the asylum's front gates. The moment I stepped inside, the air changed. It was heavy, damp, filled with the stench of mold and rust. My footsteps echoed down endless hallways, each lined with peeling paint and broken doors. It felt like the walls were leaning in, pressing closer the deeper I went. I wandered through abandoned patient rooms, their beds overturned, rusty restraints still dangling from the frames. In one room, I found children's drawings scattered across the floor, stick figures with black eyes, tall, shadowy shapes standing behind them. The paper was yellowed, brittle, but the ink looked disturbingly fresh. The deeper I explored, the more the silence pressed down, until it wasn't silent anymore. At first, it was faint, a dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled across the floor. I froze, holding my breath, straining to listen. It came again, closer now, echoing from the next hallway over. I forced myself forward, every instinct screaming to turn back. My flashlight flickered as I turned the corner, and the hallway stretched ahead, impossibly long, with a single wheelchair sitting in the middle. Rusty, one wheel bent, but it moved, slowly, steadily, as if someone invisible was pushing it toward me. I stumbled back, the beam of light shaking in my hand. That's when the whispers started. Low, broken voices overlapping, calling my name though I knew no one else was there. My skin went cold, my legs rooted in place. I ran, through stairwells, past collapsed ceilings, heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst. Every corner I turned, it felt like something was just behind me, almost brushing my shoulder. Finally, I burst into the main hall, gasping, when I saw it, a figure standing at the far end, half hidden in shadow. Its body was twisted, head tilted at an unnatural angle, arms dangling, too long to be human. It didn't move. It didn't have to. The weight of its gaze pinned me where I stood. I bolted out the doors and didn't stop running until the asylum was nothing but a dark outline against the night sky. Later, when I told my friends, they laughed, saying I'd scared myself with old stories. But I know what I saw. And sometimes, when I drive past the asylum at night, I see a single light glowing faintly in the top window. A place that's been abandoned for decades. A place that should be empty, but isn't, Story 9. I grew up in a small farmhouse at the edge of a cornfield. The nights out there were different. No traffic, no city lights, just the sound of crickets and the endless stretch of darkness pressing against the windows. One night, when I was about 12, I woke up suddenly. The house was silent, but something felt wrong. I rolled over in bed and glanced toward the window, and that's when I saw it. A shadow, a tall, unmistakable figure standing just outside, its head nearly brushing the top of the frame. The curtains were thin, and even in the pale moonlight, I could make out the broad shoulders, the stillness, the way it leaned forward as though watching me. I wanted to scream, but the sound caught in my throat. My parents' room was just down the hall, but I couldn't move. I shut my eyes, convinced it was my imagination. When I opened them again, the shadow was gone. The next morning, I told my dad. He went outside, checked the ground beneath my window. The soil was soft from recent rain, and there, clear as day, were footprints, large, heavy, leading straight to my room and back into the cornfield. From that night on, the shadow kept returning. Not every night, but often enough that I never slept easy. Sometimes it stood by the window, other times further back in the yard. Always watching, always still. One winter evening, I was downstairs in the living room when I heard a soft tapping. 3 slow knocks against the glass. My heart froze. I turned toward the big front window, and there it was again, the shadow. Taller than before, its outline sharper against the frost. My dad rushed in, grabbed his rifle, and threw open the door. But the yard was empty. No tracks in the snow this time. Nothing at all. Years later, after we moved, my parents admitted something they'd never told me. They had seen it too. Both of them. Sometimes, late at night, standing outside their own bedroom window. A shadow, darker than the night, too tall, too still to be human. To this day, I can't sleep with curtains open. Because no matter where I am, I can't shake the feeling that if I glance at the window, I'll see it again. Waiting, patient, watching. Story 10. There's a story in my family that nobody likes to talk about. It starts with my uncle, who went missing more than 20 years ago. The last place he was seen alive was an old cabin deep in the woods, far from any road or trail. They say the cabin wasn't on any map. You didn't stumble across it unless it wanted you to. Years later, when I was in college, a group of friends convinced me to go camping in that same forest. I didn't tell them about my uncle. I didn't want to scare them, but deep down, I had a sick feeling in my stomach. The first day was uneventful. We set up camp, built a fire, laughed under the stars. But that night, I woke to the sound of footsteps crunching in the leaves. Slow, heavy, circling our tents. I peeked outside, expecting to see a deer. Instead, through the trees, I saw a dim light flickering in the distance, a lantern's glow, and beside it, the outline of a small cabin that hadn't been there before. Curiosity pulled me toward it, even as fear screamed at me to stay back. My friends followed, half asleep, whispering nervously. The cabin looked ancient, wood rotting, windows boarded, door hanging crooked. yet smoke curled faintly from the chimney, as though someone had just stoked the fire. Against all reason, we went inside. The air was stale, thick with the scent of burnt wood and something metallic, like rust or blood. A single chair sat in the middle of the room, and on the walls, carved deep into the wood, were names. Dozens of them, some scratched out. I froze when I saw one of the names, my uncle's. Before I could react, the door slammed shut. The lantern sputtered out, plunging us into darkness. That's when we heard it. Breathing. Slow, ragged. Coming from the corner of the room. My flashlight flickered on just long enough to catch a glimpse. A figure, crouched low. Its face pale and stretched. Eyes reflecting like an animal's. It let out a sound, a choking rasp that didn't belong to anything human. We bolted. The door burst open behind us as if it had never been locked, and we ran blindly through the forest, not daring to look back. Somehow, we found our camp again, though none of us remembered the way. The next morning, when we tried to retrace our steps, the cabin was gone. No clearing, no chimney, no cabin at all. To this day, none of us talk about what happened. But sometimes, when I close my eyes, I hear that rasping breath, and I wonder if the cabin will ever decide to find me again. Story 11. They say every town hides a story it doesn't want the world to know. But in Ravenhill, a small forgotten town at the edge of nowhere, the secret wasn't just hidden, it was buried. What began as a call for help soon turned into a descent into the kind of darkness no human should ever face. This is a real horror story, a tale of a buried son, a cursed house, and a secret that should have remained untouched. My name is Ethan Moore. I was known in town as a healer, someone people came to when prayers weren't enough and doctors had no answers. But I never asked for what happened that day. It was late afternoon when Daniel Cross, a taxi driver I never trusted, approached me. Daniel was the type who always carried trouble in his shadow. His smile was too quick, his words too slick. "Ethan," he said, forcing friendliness into his tone, "I need your help. There's a woman, Mrs. Helena Ward. She's desperate. Something terrible happened at her house, and you're the only one she trusts." I wanted to walk away, but something in his voice, a tremor, a desperation, stopped me, and I made a choice I'd regret forever. On the ride to Ravenhill, Daniel explained, Helena, a widow, owned a house on the edge of town. Years ago, people convinced her there was treasure buried beneath her floor. They dug 15 meters deep, but the ground gave way, and someone was trapped. They say it was just a worker, Daniel muttered, his eyes darting away. But Helena wants the body out. She can't sleep, knowing he's still down there. I felt my stomach tighten. This wasn't about treasure. It was about a soul left restless. She's willing to pay $100,000 to anyone who helps, Daniel added quickly. I glared at him. Some things you don't put a price on. A body deserves peace, not profit. Inside, though, a cold unease spread through me. Why did I feel like he wasn't telling me everything? The car bumped along the broken road. Daniel leaned closer. Ethan, what if we take the money? Helena's rich. She won't miss it. We could change our lives. I turned to him, my voice low. If you ever mention that again, I'll walk back to town and never look at you again. Don't test me, Daniel. He laughed nervously, but I saw it, the greed in his eyes. And in that moment, a voice whispered inside me, don't trust him. He will betray you. Was it my own thought or something else warning me? I couldn't tell, but my pulse quickened, and the air in the taxi felt colder than it should have been. An hour later, we arrived. Helena's house loomed like a forgotten monument. The walls were cracked, the windows darkened by grime, and an unnatural stillness hung over the building. The moment I stepped out of the car, the stench of damp earth and decay hit me. The door creaked open, and a young woman appeared. She was Helena's daughter, pale, beautiful, but with eyes that wandered restlessly, never focusing on me. Her words slurred, her body trembled. My chest tightened. She's not alone in that body, I thought. Something else was living there. Inside, dust blanketed expensive furniture. Cobwebs clung to the corners. The house smelled like time itself had rotted away. Daniel leaned toward me. Told you, this place isn't right. I ignored him, though every bone in my body agreed. Finally, Helena Ward entered the room. She was in her 50s, dressed in black, her face lined with sorrow. Her voice shook as she spoke. They told you about the body, didn't they? She asked. I nodded. Her hands trembled as she clutched her scarf. It wasn't a worker, Ethan. It was my son. My own son, Mark. The words punched the air out of me. Daniel's head jerked in shock, but Helena kept speaking, her voice breaking. They convinced me to dig. They said gold was waiting. My son was helping them when the earth swallowed him. He screamed once, and then silence. I begged them to bring him back, but they covered the hole and left. My boy is still down there, under the ground where he died. I can't breathe knowing he's trapped. Her sobs filled the room, and as I listened, a chill crawled up my spine, settling like ice in my lungs. Her son wasn't gone. Not completely. Helena's grief was overwhelming, but something else pressed on me, a weight that wasn't hers. In moments like these, I often felt the presence of unseen companions. Some people call them spirits, others call them demons. I never cared for the name, but I knew they were there. And in Helena's house, they were restless. The air grew heavy, my skin prickled with static. A faint whisper grazed my ear, too soft to understand, but enough to freeze my blood. I steadied my breath, though my chest ached. Is this real, or am I losing my mind? I wondered. My hands trembled, as if the ground beneath me pulsed with something alive. That night, I walked the hallways of Helena's house. The floor groaned beneath me, though I walked lightly. Shadows stretched longer than they should, clinging to the walls like living things. Every step felt like trespassing into a place the living had no right to enter. At one point, I paused. The silence was deafening until I heard it. a faint scratching beneath the floorboards. My heart pounded. Was it rats? Or was it something trying to claw its way out? I whispered a prayer, though my voice cracked. God help me. If this is his soul crying out, show me mercy. The scratching stopped, but in its place came a cold rush of air that wrapped around my body, seeping into my bones. My breath grew shallow, my skin clammy. I swore I felt fingers brushing against my ankle. I stumbled back, gasping. Was it real? Or did my fear create it? I'll never know. By dawn, Helena begged us to help her open the ground. Daniel looked eager, his eyes glittering with thoughts of treasure, not tragedy. But I couldn't shake the feeling that digging would unleash something far worse than grief. I turned to Helena. Your son's body may rest there, but his soul, it's no longer here. What lies beneath is not him anymore. Tears streamed down her face. She wanted to argue, but the house itself seemed to groan in agreement. As we left Ravenhill, I felt eyes watching me from every shadow. My chest was heavy, my breath shallow, and in the distance, I swear I heard it again. Scratching, muffled beneath the earth. Some secrets are meant to be uncovered, but others must stay buried. If you ever find yourself standing over ground that holds both treasure and tragedy, remember this: gold might glitter, but the dead demand silence. This wasn't just a haunting. This was a terrifying, true horror story. Every story tonight has one thing in common: the unexpected, the unknown. The moments when ordinary life turns into something horrifying. Keep your eyes open, your doors locked, and your mind alert. Because nightmares don't only live in dreams. Sometimes they live next door, on the road, or in the quiet of your own home. If you enjoyed these stories, subscribe to 60 Nightmares for more terrifying tales. Turn on notifications and never miss a story. And remember, some nightmares are waiting for you, just outside your door.